So let's go to Deputy Superintendent Angie Stallings on item 18. And are you bringing this up on the?
I will. Yes.
Okay.
Just give me one moment, and if you'd like to open up.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Angie Stallings. If you'd like to open up 18.1 on board docs, I will be referring to that document, which I will put up momentarily. As you remember, last month I came to you with a list of items that staff and board members have identified as potential amendments to statute for your consideration or awareness that these are things that we plan to work on. Let me just get, or approach legislators about. There's 9 items that have been added this month. And then also at the bottom of the document, you'll see the list of motions you've made in the past. Since our last meeting, I'll be happy to just quickly report that the legislature did, the Legislative Interim Committee, you see that number 1 under Board Approved Requests for Statutory Changes. The Education Interim Committee did adopt a committee bill with your recommendations for licensing changes. So that's very exciting, and we'll continue to watch that as it goes through the process. So the 9 things I'll quickly go through. If you'd like me to, Chair, I can stop at any time, or if you'd like me to just go through them, and then if there's any questions, you just let me know.
Let's do one at a time, and let's have a pause. And then...
Okay. Great. So the first issue is something that was raised by our staff. The vision screening program in our schools is currently governed in statute by USOR, the Utah State Office of Rehabilitation, which recently, 1.5 years ago, moved to be housed under DWS. Because of that change, we recommend that that governance now move to USDB, which reports to you. So that's the first one. There are some other tangential items, and if you look at this document, you'll see EB in parentheses. Those items that have an EB next to them, the Eliminating Barriers Task Force also reviewed. We took all of the items we had at the time of the Eliminating Barriers Task Force meeting, and those first 4 were reviewed by them. The Eliminating Barriers Task Force, in addition to the first sentence, raised the other potential amendments there about clarifying what happens if a student fails the screening and what student data should be included in the vision screening registry. So those were recommendations of the task force.
Any questions? Ooh, that background music kind of nice, isn't it? Okay, continue.
All right. Number 2 is eliminating the requirement for a textbook or instructional materials publisher to have the publisher's materials reviewed by an external evaluator before being submitted to the Instructional Materials Commission. Staff just felt like it was duplicative because oftentimes the commission goes through the same type of study that the external evaluator would.
Any questions? Okay, we'll start with Board Member Lear.
How does the current, do you have an idea how the current commission and or Alan Lawson, I lost his last name?
Griffin.
Griffin.
Oh, Griffin. Yeah. How do they feel about this?
It was his recommendation.
Great. Then that's all I need to know. Thanks.
Okay. Vice Chair Brittany Cummings.
My question was, I mean, Carol's question was similar, but are we certain that that process is completely duplicative? And if not, is the commission willing to fill any gaps that might be missing that this external evaluator process is going through? So I'm hesitant to say, yes, I approve it when we don't have a full understanding of what might fall through the cracks in that.
If you'd like us to get more information, I don't know if Ellen is here in the audience because unfortunately I don't know that off the top of my head. But if you'd like more information, we'd be happy to kind of hold on this one and get more information first.
Can you, go ahead. Vice Chair Ellis.
That's my memory from our our committee meeting also, was that we wanted to get more information as a committee. We looked at it, but we didn't recommend it without further information.
Okay. I apologize I wasn't there. So.
Yeah, I could be remembering wrong.
So can that information come to us in an email and refer to this moment?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We'll for now, I'll hold on reaching out to a legislator about that to allow for some more discussion of that.
Okay.
Okay. The next one is eliminating the critical languages program from statute and consolidating the funds from both the critical language program and the dual language program into one pot and being used all for the dual language immersion program. The critical, and I can stop there, and then if you have questions, I can tell you more about that.
Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
Sorry, I'm not completely familiar with these two programs, but the critical languages program, as it was intended, did it reach students who were not in a dual language immersion program?
So the critical language actually came before dual language immersion, and it was really intended, especially at a secondary level, to pick up Mandarin, Russian, Arabic, a couple of other languages. And the schools filled very quickly, the secondary schools filled that need very quickly and maxed out on their ability to offer more courses. So it sat for a couple of years without being able to add additional teachers. At that same time, about a year later, dual immersion came into being at the elementary level. So it's been sitting there. This came out in an audit as well, that the funding for critical languages, which were kind of these two separate programs but sort of same intention, are now really, the funds have been morphed into one. So this would actually change the statute to match the practice.
Right.
Does that make sense? I think I didn't
Do you have a
answer
follow-up?
a question.
Yeah, I do. I guess my question was did we meet the true intent of the old, and by merging it, because dual language, if I understand it correctly, and I am a novice in these particular topics, mostly affects students in elementary and middle school, and critical languages was for high schools. And so by merging them, are we reducing the availability of critical language? And so I'm just asking, are we...
It's a merging of the two funding streams into one, because the critical languages that functions under world languages at the secondary level. So that would be funded through the regular FTE funding source, but that was the original funding was to provide impetus to include these new languages. And according to all the data we have from the LEAs, those classes are now in place and have been maxed out. So we did meet the intent.
Okay. Board Member Reby.
To respond to Board Member Cummings' concerns, we brought down Carl Bowman, and he spoke to us at length about how these funding pools were met and how they merged together, and how we would not be diminishing a pool on either aspect of critical language or dual immersion. So we were very concerned about that when we had that discussion, and we reached out to all of the departments involved and made sure that we weren't going to diminish any resources that were available to them currently.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, Angie.
All right, the next one is kind of a general presentation of these competing policy interests of state accountability versus a parent or student's right to opt out of taking a statewide assessment, and trying to figure out how to harmonize those, or what sections of code might need to be eliminated to eliminate that conflict or tension.
Vice Chair Ellis.
Yes, so this was just kind of open up for discussion, not necessarily that we were ready to make a proposal yet here, just that we wanted to kind of start opening it. But they put together something that I was going to put on the agenda for our next meeting.
Angie.
I just want to, one of the reasons why we're bringing a lot of these concepts to you in such a short snippet is because we haven't fleshed out everything. And oftentimes it's hard to flesh these out until you start working with the legislative drafters on the language. And the issue I just want to raise is if we hold on some of these, that means that I won't be reaching out to legislators to open bill files. But if you part of this is just to give you an awareness that we will be reaching out to legislators to open bill files, but that then we would bring the bill file or the language or the concept more fleshed out back to you for your approval and support. Right now, and so I guess I raise this as whether you want me to say don't work with legislators on these concepts, I'll hold, or do you want me to work with legislators but then bring concepts more fleshed out to you?
Vice Chair Ellis.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure my task force, because we haven't talked about this as a task force. This was me asking them so that we could maybe possibly talk about this. And so I didn't want to that look like I'm saying, hey, this is a legislative priority, because that's not what happened.
Right. Good point.
Okay. Board Member Lear.
And I have a little reservation about this. This is more one of those comments, Brittany. Sorry, it's just me thinking out loud. I have some reservation. I think there's some inherent tension between these two, and I fear that actively looking for legislation might cause, or the cure might be worse than the disease. And so I guess my druthers would be. It seems to be adequately working with kind of equal dissatisfaction about both issues. So I would personally prefer to leave that alone and just see what develops. I don't want to start something that then ends up with going south in a direction that
Superintendent Dixon.
Yeah, I also just want to mention that this is an issue that comes up time and time again when we're out in the field and with superintendents, other legislators who were not the original draftees have brought this to us. So the task force talked about it, but this is something that is swirling in a lot of circles. So whether you all feel the need to have a voice or not, others will weigh in. So this gives you an opportunity to say, have some discussion and say, here's some things that we think ought to be reconciled, because I mean, I certainly would never put my guarantee on it, but it's highly likely that you will see something. We've already heard from a couple of people who are at least opening up conversations on the Hill right now about possible drafts of trying to reconcile or at least go in a different direction. So it's just about, do you want to have an opinion and weigh in or not? But to your point, Board Member Larry, you're right. It's the cow's out of the barn, horse out of the gate. Whatever. I don't know what the metaphor is.
Go ahead, mix a metaphor.
Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
So my concern on this particular topic is that we would be asking somebody to open a bill file and we don't even know what we want yet. And, and you say details are worked out in the process, but at least we know the direction we want to go. And we haven't even had that directional conversation, because this is this particular topic, when you talk about resolution, would either be everyone must take the test, or and so you talk about, or no one takes the test. And so the resolution is very diametrically opposed to each other. And so if we don't know what direction we want to recommend, we haven't had that discussion, I would hesitate to ask a legislator to even open this file. But if people do, obviously a legislator may have something that they want to do. I don't think we should hesitate to participate in that conversation or have that conversation now, but I don't want to open a bill file until we even know what direction as a board we want to go with it.
Okay. Board Member Hanson.
My legislator is opening a bill file on this, and he hasn't been shy about telling people. I don't know what direction he's going exactly, but, is it possible that we can work with him instead of opening up a different bill file with a different legislator?
Absolutely.
Mike Winder.
Angie.
And just to also clarify, sometimes there are bills that people already have open on these topics. For example, you remember last month I brought to you the concept that Representative Pulsifer brought to us of eliminating that report. There may be others where legislators already have bill files open, so we wouldn't necessarily be asking for a different legislator, but it would be that we could openly be working with them and saying the board is aware we're working with you, and giving them maybe the sense of where we think the board is. And I think that, Vice Chair Cummins, your feedback is spot on. And I think at one point, Vice Chair Ellis didn't necessarily have the answer. We actually, Tiffany and I researched some of the tensions, some of those provisions. We've actually got a number of sections of code where you could look at changes so that you could resolve the tension one way or the other. And, but that is the million-dollar question, is which way do you resolve it? And so maybe it's not ready for us to move forward as staff.
Vice Chair Ellis.
I would agree that it's not quite ready, only because there's a lot to be discussed. And you weren't there at that meeting, and I asked them after the meeting, and just to help me find that information so we could have it as further discussion in the future. So I feel like it's kind of in an inappropriate place when it was just me saying, hey, can we look at this at our next meeting? So that's why I'm really hesitant to say
Well,
yes.
the way I see this going, you're chairing that
Right, but I do.
that committee, but at the same time, yeah, and so we don't want to lose this, but it's just not on the list. I don't know if you put it down as a possible or something. So, okay. So I think the consensus is pause. Okay, next.
The next one, last session, 2017 HB 442 alcohol amendments was this huge monstrous bill that dealt with many topics. And one portion of the bill created this new program, the Underage Drinking Prevention Program, that would require us to contract with one or more providers to provide a presentation, but then the definition says a program on underage drinking prevention. Part of that bill required you to establish the Underage Drinking Prevention Program Advisory Council, which has been meeting. There are some small changes that advisory council would recommend, which is striking the word presentation, for example, and leaving the word more broad as program. And just opening a bill file, and even Representative Wilson last year stated that after this bill was passed that he'd be open to hearing our feedback for this next year. So that's what we would be doing, is kind of giving him, we did an RFI, we've got the advisory council. RFI is a request for information. The short story is most of the proposals we got back from the RFI were not one-shot presentations like an assembly. They were more like curricula, or they were kind of a series of presentations to be done throughout a staggered time. So that's what we would be working with, or approaching Representative Wilson about.
Okay. Board Member Reeby.
I'm on this advisory council, and we did get together and we looked at all the information, and we are in process of trying to come up with an RFP and the language we'd like to see in the RFP. So the program or the presentation was definitely a conversation that we had at length. So there seems to be a lot of support for asking for some additional conversation. Thank you.
Board Member Lear.
I just had a thought, and if this is obvious in this summary, then sorry. But is this something that is going to create a program that will be required for schools or districts, and then will it be funded?
Yes, it already was. The program was already created, and we have $1.5 million that will be coming to us from a portion of the alcohol sales. So the reason why the bill passed last year, and now we had to wait until the 18-19 school year, is this 17-18 tax year, or last tax, yeah, there's $1.5 million. Yes.
Okay, any further? Did you, Board Member Repeat, you have a follow-up?
Can we go back to number 5? You skipped number 5. Do we skip number 5?
Oh, I did. I apologize. Number 5 is actually, we're going to be talking about this tomorrow afternoon in the study session. But since our last board meeting, the Public Ed Appropriations Subcommittee made a motion to roll up a number of line items. These 3 here, K through 3 program money, early intervention, and early intervention software, as well as class size reduction, up into the WPU, and asked our staff to come up with some models of what the impacts of those would look like. We've also had many legislators and our own staff and LEA representatives that said, what about if instead of rolling it all up into the WPU, we rolled those programs into a block grant to allow more flexibility for LEAs so that, if one LEA wanted to spend more money on class size or extended school day or software licenses, depending on the school and the location, they don't all need the same thing, but you could pool that money and allow LEAs more flexibility. And so that concept, actually, staff will be presenting in more detail tomorrow, the benefits of doing that. And one of the options you'll be looking at tomorrow actually includes rolling in the class size reduction money. But that would be for us to start talking about some options about what that would look like and the financial impacts to your LEAs.
Okay. Do you have a follow-up?
I do. This is kind of exciting because it has, to use Scott Jones' word, a lot of synergy that has all of the LEAs and entities working together and responding in a positive way. So when we think of how we want to move forward, this is kind of how it should move forward. Lots of people communicating and trying to find the best solution for money that might not be being spent as best as it could. So it's been really exciting to be a part of this and talk to our LEAs.
Okay, very good. Please continue.
Thank you. I didn't mean to pass that one because it is a very exciting one. The next one, 7, is potential amendments to provisions of the SB 143 Competency-Based Education Grants Program. That program requires us to award 3 planning grants, no more than 3. We have 13 pilot LEAs right now, and staff are wondering if maybe they want to expand the number of grants from 3 to more because they are not looking forward to the day to saying no to 10 of those 13. So it would just be talking to maybe the sponsors of that original legislation to see if they want to either give us the authority to award planning grants to more than 3 LEAs or something along those lines.
Any questions? Board Member Cannon?
I just wonder, how's the idea behind this competency-based, how's that been received at the LEA level?
It's been, yeah. Sarah, do you want to come speak to that?
Thank you. So Sarah Young, Coordinator for Digital Teaching and Learning. We've had a lot of enthusiasm from the LEAs. I actually will extend it beyond the 13. We have additional districts and charter schools who are sending representatives to our convenings of these pilot LEAs because they're interested as well, even though they weren't prepared to commit to a pilot space. So because the vision for competency right now and the creation of that framework is getting our stakeholders together to create that and using their voices to really shape the vision, it's been a positive effort thus far.
Follow up?
So at the end of the pilot, where do you see this going for Utah? What does it mean to our kids?
Sure. So right now what we're looking at is creating a framework. Basically, I'm looking at what do you need to have in place to offer competency education, which is, in a nutshell, education that looks beyond the typical boundaries of time, place, and pace. At this point, that framework would be used to create an application to meet the legislation that's being referred to here to award a grant program to start some implementation efforts. We have a separate conversation that we are starting here within the agency, and I think we'll be bringing to the board in the future in regards to saying, so how do you see framing competency, recognizing that, standards are at the state level, curriculum is at the local level, and where do competencies fall within that realm, and seeking your direction. We're probably a couple months out from that. And at that point, taking that direction, we really see this, and we've talked with our LEAs about this, is being driven at the local level. So looking at it in terms of letting LEAs make decisions in regards to embracing competency, if that's something that fits their model. If not, allowing them to continue to run their schools as they best see fit for their kids.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Sarah. Please continue.
The next set of recommendations are being worked on by your student data policy Privacy Policy Advisory Committee and Senator Andrade and your Chief Privacy Officer and staff. There's some of these recommendations have already been discussed by the Advisory Committee, and at their next meeting, they're going to get kind of a draft of some recommended changes that Senator Andrade has already committed to or said he would run. So it would just be us working on those recommendations for changes to the Student Data Privacy Protection Act.
Board Member Gravitt? Is that Hanson?
It's just me. She doesn't talk much. Gotta get her to talk more.
Well, you're trying to, because it seems like that mic's in front of her with the light on.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
This is one of those things that a lot of people have concerns about. So I think before we approve kind of a blanket, let's go for this, that we need to know specifically what we're talking about for changes. Just an FYI.
Okay. Your light on. Okay, I think we're still good. Please continue.
All right, so the next one, so should I just hold that one then as something to be talked about? Just FYI, the advisory committee your advisory committee is going to be looking at very specific language changes, and they're fairly minor. One will include the recommendation that an LEA, if they have a data breach, that they actually inform our office. A couple of other things were related to ages. Anyway. The next one was actually raised by a board member, and I apologize that I can't remember which board member it was, but it was to add special education educators and math educators with a math major as eligible for the teacher salary supplement program.
Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
Do we have an idea of how much that would cost? So we're asking someone to open a file to solve this problem. Do we know?
We could get the numbers. Travis Rawlings would be able to come up with those. I don't know. Have we?
Superintendent Dixon.
And again, this concept is not something generated necessarily by us, but every year, this is one that a bill file is opened and they ask us for data. So this one is actually information so that you're aware that every year this comes up and they work with our office to get that data. So I don't think this is one that was a specific ask as much as I think there was a discussion about it here, but we're not asking to go approach somebody to open a bill file by any means, but definitely we've been asked for this data.
What actually happened is a representative, is it Potter, I think, presented a bill at the last Public Ed Appropriations Subcommittee, and it was to add, I believe, the special education educators to that. And so right after the discussion of that bill, and I don't know which board member was there, said, well, what about also math majors, math educators with math majors? So it would just be looking at those numbers. There's already a bill file open that's being presented, and so kind of looking at maybe which classes of teachers we might recommend be added to that list.
And
Superintendent.
I didn't pick up on this, so I so apologize, Angie, but actually math educators who currently have a math major qualify. It's math educators with a math education major.
Okay.
Vice Chair Warner.
That's right.
And just to that kind of stemmed from, and I don't remember being there. Maybe it was me and I just don't remember. But it stems from, there are teachers in this state that have bachelor's and master's and combined together with two different universities have enough for a math degree, but can't seem to get a math degree without going back and taking some basic courses. So for example, there's a teacher at Mountain Crest High School, I think two of them actually at Ridgeline, that have master's degrees in math education and have bachelor's degrees in something else and are teaching math, great math teachers, but because they don't have, I know one of them had to take a basic chemistry class and is currently in a chemistry 101 class because she didn't have enough of a science. They didn't have a couple of courses, and so they're going back to taking basic classes even though they have master's degrees. So this would help alleviate that issue where they don't get the TSSP funding.
Vice Chair Brittany comments.
So my concern comes as it seems like this does come up every year, and it's always a conversation because we're trying to manage employment at the state level legislatively. And I agree and concur that it's important to attract teachers, and it's harder to do so in certain areas. And we've had that conversation regarding math and some courses as well as special education. And I know that we need that opportunity, but I question whether or not we keep adding more and more money to this at the legislative level, or get rid of the program entirely and allow LEAs to hire teachers and to attract teachers to areas that they need as they need to do so. And so I hesitate to support as a board saying, let's go forward to ask for more money for this program when it actually hinders LEA's flexibility to be flexible in their hiring strategies.
Board Member Raby.
In theory, this sounds like a great idea to offer people more money for jobs that are hard to fill. But as we start to dangle carrots in front of all these different types of people in different areas, we are diminishing the big picture. The big picture is that special education, math, and all of our teachers are under a lot of stress, and the hardest to fill spots are going to start to turn over faster. So when we look at our schools, instead of giving a Band-Aid here and a Band-Aid there and a Band-Aid here, let's look at a more global fix where we are eliminating some of the stressors that are in our schools. So, I mean, if you ask me to give more money to special education, that'd be great. But the reason why they're leaving is not because they're not making enough money. It's a very hard job, and they don't have the resources to help them. So by giving them more money, you're not making their job any better. It's not really enough to make their work environment better. We have talked about wraparound services. We've talked about providing better services for children at need and at high risk. And when we look to that bigger problem, we help all of our students and we help all of our departments, and we probably would decrease the turnover. So although it seems like a good idea, it doesn't really address the bigger issue of why these people are leaving. It's not amount of money, it's more of how stressful it is, how the lack of resources they have, the lack of help they have. We just need other things in place where if we combined all that bonus money, we might be able to provide better resources. So I am always hesitant to give one group of teachers more money when I could look to helping the bigger picture and the bigger problem that we have instead of just those one specific problems.
Board Member Lear.
I think this is maybe a question for Kathleen and Jenny, teachers in the room. One thing I heard when this started was that it was going to be divisive, that it's going to be kind of pitting teachers against each other. Do you think that has happened already to some extent? Jenny, Kathleen? First, and then, yeah, just you.
You know, I don't think it has. If I'm not ever going to be a math teacher. Well, actually, I thought about being a math teacher when I went to start taking classes, but it wasn't $5,000 that made me change my whole career. For special ed, it wouldn't be $2,500 in a year that would make me change my career. The things that make you want to stay someplace and someplace that makes you want to work more and do a better job or stay longer or whatever is that you have the resources available to you. So that's why when I hear about these little stipends, I'm just like, this isn't going to make somebody change their career path. So giving them a better work environment and giving our students a better place to go to school and giving them the support we need, that makes us enjoy our jobs and want to stay and go into it.
Right, and I would just agree with Kathleen because, for example, as an English teacher, my department doesn't look over at the math department and say, you guys don't deserve extra money. But what we do sometimes is it's really hard to know that we're all in this together, and a little bit of money put together with a little bit of money and a little bit of money could make a real difference with a certified librarian in our school, for example, or things like that. And so I would agree with kind of like wraparound services. That's going to make teachers stay, not a little bit of money dangled in front of one set of teachers. I mean, it does make you feel a little devalued when an English teacher is spending hours and hours and hours grading, but we're a dime a dozen. So anyway, but I don't see the tension between teachers. We just are all kind of in it together.
Thanks.
Board Member Cummings, and then I want to speak to this. I think I need to speak to something.
Yeah,
today.
I actually had a teacher this last weekend, and let me just say, I agree with board members Reaping Gravitt, because, that's been what I've been saying for a very long time. But I've also talked with the teacher actually this last Sunday, who said she's leaving because she sees her fellow teacher receive $8,000 and she got a 0.5% raise and she can't make ends meet, so she's going to leave possibly early from when she retires. So money, I think it's, while it may not be across the board, but I do think for some it does matter. But I think the bigger issue is definitely, how much time the teachers are needing versus lacking. But then again, I asked her that, and she says it doesn't matter how much time you give us, because the districts or the principals, they're just going to fill that up right quick. And she says, we're not going to have any time. It's not up to us. It's up to the districts and up to the admin. So that's a problem. But but maybe the money is a bonus. For some, it's a huge difference. So I think it varies.
Okay, Vice Chair Warner.
Can we just clarify, the TSSP funding is $4,100? It's not $8,000. I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
And then a couple of questions were asked, and we can certainly get down into the weeds of how is it received, how is it perceived. But the reality is, and some of the questions were directed to only those that live in the education world, and some of us don't, but yet we still have quite a few opinions because we have a lot of educators around our home tables, and we're engaged into some schools. But this is what it's, and I've looked into this aggressively. There's the haves and have-nots, and if you have these endorsements and you're a have, I have more teachers applauding that you could get that extra money than being critical of the teacher. And then for those districts, especially the rural districts that are trying to lure and attract and get people to fill these slots, that money is really important. And it does make a difference. And I know people right now that are going to school and special ed, and the incentive, besides the joy of working with special needs children, is that compensation. And so for what the legislature has done in the past, I think it's met the goals. I think, there's probably a little bit of friction between salary things. So I just want to be not really on the record, but just make sure I speak for the intent, and that there is people that do make those choices for that extra money, and they go after their masters and other things to get that extra compensation to provide for their families. And the bonus is what happens in the classroom once they get that extra education. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins.
Just a question. Is there anything, so if this program was gone, is there anything that prohibits an LEA from differentiating pay for their teachers, so they could say, I'm trying to attract for this spot, I could pay them $1 million if I wanted to?
They're already engaged in those conversations.
I need to make one correction.
Okay, one correction.
I just need to make one quick correction. I see.
Are you correcting me?
No,
Okay.
this is something I said earlier. I'm correcting myself. I did talk about math educators, and it's actually math educators can, if they have a math education degree, they can qualify via equivalency that's already in statute. And Travis will correct anything else that we have misspoken about today, because he knows this inside and out.
Okay. Board Member Reeby.
I agree with you with lane changes. I'm at a master's plus 40, and that has been a huge incentive to provide for my family better. But we do, special education is such a big group that we hear about it often, but we are really desperate for speech pathologists. We're really desperate for audiologists. We're really desperate for social workers, psychologists. Special ed is such a big group that we can tag it, but we do have a lot of really dire needs in our schools for people all around special education. So when we say special education, do we mean audiologists, language pathologists, psychologists, social workers? What is a special education person? Is it everyone that's involved in special education? Because if it's just the teacher that's in the classroom, it might not be providing as much help as if it was everybody that was dealing with all the special education needs. So if we were going to go in that direction, then I'd like to be expanded out to all the people that are actually providing all those special education services, because that's why we have a high turnover rate in the homerooms of the special education classrooms.
Okay. So Angie, where are we? We're still on.
No, we're done.
I
I've got the
bullet-
4 that I'm holding on, you can see right there, and then the rest, I've got the, okay, go ahead and pursue. So I think I've got.
Okay, we had a question on number 2, didn't we? And
It was from Board Member Lear and
So
yeah,
the,
there's
the 4 right here that I'm showing now are the 4 that essentially I understood that there were more questions and answers, and you, right?
that's number 1.
Those, yes. I reordered the list. I apologize. This
okay.
is
But I thought number 2, there was a question, and Colin was out here,
That's true, which is now number 1 up.
which is now number 1.
Yes.
If you wanted that question answered,
Oh,
he's
who's
here.
Travis.
Alan.
Oh, Alan, sorry.
Board Member Lear, this is to answer your question.
So Board Member Lear, this might have been one of your questions. Do you remember?
If the commission and Alan thought this was a good idea.
One more time,
And,
Carol.
and I really got my answer. I just thought, I wondered if the commission and you thought this was a good idea, meaning the stopping the duplication of a right, special advisor, special reader on top of the commission. I wanted to call it a special prosecutor, but that happens in other parts of the office.
Alan Griffin from the Curriculum Content
That's where I
Specialist
pulled that out.
Teaching and Learning. I think it has, there are a couple of issues with it. When it was first proposed, UEN was enrolled to create a database for this program, which they worked with for a couple of years, and then because of funding, they discontinued the database. We still get the material in, we still get the independent reviews in, and they're correlated in the RIMS program. It is a good idea because I don't know why we can't trust the publishers to send us that information, because we review it to see if they meet the core standards anyway, even with the independent review that's sent in. So it makes sense to me just to review it, let the publisher send it to us, and let's review what the publisher takes care of, and eliminate the need for policing that particular area.
I thought it'd just be good to answer that question because I had it as a loose end. So, okay, is that it, Ann? Oh, Vice Chair Ellis.
Sorry, it's not about this.
Okay, it's about something else, so we'll get to that. Vice Chair Ellis.
Well, I didn't realize when we were going through, we were giving you the go ahead without, because we didn't take a motion or anything. And so I do have more questions. I just thought this was kind of more informational. So on number 8, the Student Data Privacy Policy Advisory Committee, I know they're working with Senator Anderegg already. And so I guess I'm just feeling a little bit concerned that we're opening a bill file and we don't have those list of recommendations, and they're meeting again. And anyway.
Yes, Angie.
One thing I guess that I could just explain is Senator Anderegg is a member of that advisory committee, and he actually opened a bill file long ago. And I think because he's part of that advisory committee, there have been some issues that have come up, and you are correct, they haven't been presented to the board yet. If we don't, he's going to be soliciting feedback from that group and from Whitney. And I guess mostly I wanted you to be aware of that. There are some recommendations that Whitney and David have. We could review them right now. We're going to review them with the advisory committee in our next meeting, and we could bring them to the board. I don't think that he would do a bill. we will bring those to you when they're ready. It's kind of that issue of if we don't start working with legislators now and we wait till January to have everything fleshed out, it will be too late.
Well, he's going to do it anyway. I guess my biggest concern is an advisory committee isn't the board, and just like any other entity. And so I want to make sure that Senator Anderegg understands that relationship in the discussions, that these haven't necessarily been presented to the board. And so if he's under the impression that the advisory committee, even though we have created them, are giving him recommendations based upon board support, then it comes to us after he's done it, and there's people that don't like it. I mean, it just causes a lot of confusion for a legislator. So I just want to make sure that relationship is clear.
Okay, Angie?
And when we work with legislators on these concepts, we will explain that we do not have flushed out bill drafts ready, and that the board has not taken a position for or against those bills. But the idea is that we can start working with legislators on these concepts and then have those bills come to you. The hard part is it's hard to have some of these issues completely fleshed out. And so I guess we'll make sure and send that message that this has not been board approved, every single change.
And it's been, and if I might, and it's been on every issue, as you've worked with staff and the legislators moving forward, is that we'd rather be in on the front end of the conversation pending board approval, but you're not going to get board approval until that last hour, last second as things are getting out. But it's better to fight for your position early than later. I don't know a better way to say that. Yeah, I didn't see your light.
I completely agree, and I know that it's a really delicate balance, but just continue bringing us reports so that we don't look at it and are like, what in the world? You know, that's not a good way to go.
Okay. Board Member Laird.
Well, and my point is maybe a little contradictory to yours, Chair, but sometimes if I think it's a bad idea, speaking as one board member, I don't even want to start down the road. And I don't want to get co-opted into starting down the road because people say to me, well, if you don't participate in this, it's going to go a different direction. Because it might be my opinion that I just say, I don't like that idea at all. And so I don't want to get sort of led down the garden path thinking that we have to go along to get along, because I think sometimes my opinion is just going to be, no, this is a bad idea.
And we don't have enough staff to cover everything that's being put out there, and we don't have enough meeting time to cover everything, but we can certainly, by doing this list, it's not really picking battles, but particular issues that are a little bit on the forefront that we are choosing to put some energy in, but not saying it's got a board approval. Because I've heard staff keep saying this, the board have not weighed in on this, and will not until at the very end, because of those little surprises that get snuck in, so that they don't get that endorsement. But that's what we've been doing. Is there, Angie? I think we've covered it, and this has all been good, and we're going to keep bringing it back because it's all right around the corner, and keep working with the committee as we keep finding things that we want to address. So this is a little different than what we've done in the past. So I appreciate your patience, and everyone else will keep moving this forward. Thank you.